champions here. That's right.
3, 2, 1.
Let's go. God gave me a talent, so let me flaunt the gift.
Broadcasting live from the Property Cashflow Studios, this is the Property Cashflow Experience, the world's leading podcast on building cash flow in property, real estate, fast. Hosted by the Cashflow King and your favorite mentor, the possibility of living the life you desire starts here.
Damn.
Let's get ready to rumble!
All right, welcome back to episode 5 of the Property Cashflow podcast. How you doing, Dwayne?
Doing good, mate. Doing good. I'm looking forward to this podcast. I know the last podcast we had was just the tip of the iceberg, and this podcast is going to be getting even further into it. So I'm looking forward to this a lot.
Yeah, so last time we covered part 1. So this is really part 2 of that question, which was, if I had X amount of money, how would I spend it? Like, what's the best way to spend it? So that I can't remember who asked the question now, but that was they wanted our expert advice on what we would do if we had £1,000. Then there was 2 or 3 other people that said 20,000, 30,000, 100,000. So
Yeah.
I think for this episode, what we'll do is we'll take the 2 people that asked about 20 and 30,000. How would we spend it or invest it if we had that money saved up? Let's just take an average and let's just call it 25,000 actually. So if we say we're going to do it for 25,000, let's look at that. So how we would use that money and how we would turn that 25,000 into, let's say, 250,000 in the next 2 or 3 years.
Let's do that.
All right.
So obviously 25,000 is actually a good sum. It's probably typically what someone might save up after 10 or 15 years, putting aside maybe a 500 or £1,000 a month over a bit of time. It's typically what investors usually start off with if they haven't been gifted anything. 25,000. So how would I use that?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. So 25,000 typical is go and buy a buy-to-let. That's what a typical person would do.
Yeah.
What I would do is actually go down the route of focusing on lease option or a rent-to-rent. Because what's going to happen is you can say, let's go for Coventry, for example.
Yeah, okay.
You could potentially get or Coventry or the Midlands.
Birmingham.
You may get on average maybe a 1-bed flat for between 100 to 125,000.
Yeah.
In the mid-range. And now you're going to need around 25,000 as a deposit.
Yeah, 25%.
Because it's 25% down.
And all the extras,
legal fees, stamp duty, etc. So you're going to need around £30,000. So if you were to get a standard buy-to-let, when you consider stamp duty, legal fees, you're probably going to have to only get a property that's worth 80,000.
Yeah.
In the Midlands, that means you're probably going to be ending up in a property in the lower end of the market, a lower area.
Yeah.
So which will come with its challenges, won't it?
Well, it'll be the tenant group straight away.
Yeah.
So if you look at the tenant group of that versus, let's say, a more of a luxury apartment in Birmingham city centre or even Coventry city centre, you're not going to get that for that price. You're looking at a lot more.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, a lot more money.
Because if you look at the numbers, it's £80,000 property, 25% down, so that's 20 grand. Legal fees, let's call it rough.
Well, just do 100. Just call it 100,000, right? We'll just call it that.
So 80 to 100,000.
Yeah.
25,000, that's right there.
Yeah.
Then you look at, let's say the rent is around £500, £600 a month. Mortgage is going to be 250, 300.
Yeah, call it 550 is about average for that price range.
The mortgage is going to be around £200 to £300.
Depends if we're interest only or repayment.
Let's do repayment.
So repayment, you probably, that ballpark.
Yeah.
It might be up to 400, but
So even if we went lower end, 250.
Yeah.
250. Then you've got your building insurance of 30 quid. So you're now up to 280.
Yeah.
And then plus, if you want to have it as quote unquote passive, you've got a management company that's going to be charging you 10% of your £550.
Yeah, it's another 55.
So that's 55 quid. So you're looking at expenses of 335 on 500. Minimum, exactly.
Nah, I wouldn't even say it. That's if interest only. Those sort of numbers are interest only.
Let's just, even if you went off that.
Repayment, you're probably looking at probably 450 of the 550.
So anywhere between, if you do interest only and repayment, so what was it, 335?
Yeah, I reckon just from those figures there you've said, just in my head, you're looking at maybe £100 a month profit. And that doesn't include repairs.
Exactly.
And maintenance.
Exactly. So interest-only repayment profit between 100, maybe a bit more than that.
Yeah, something
and
like that.
And that doesn't include factoring voids. So
Yeah,
then your margins
voids.
are eroded even further.
Yeah.
So let's go off that example.
And the first month's rent,
Which
like
even-
for the management company, they're
So-
going to take 50% of that first month's payment just
So
to
even
find you the
if we
tenant.
were optimistic,
Yeah.
and optimistic. So I'm going to be Mr. Optimistic. You'll
Yeah,
be
yeah.
Mr. Realistic.
Okay,
Optimistic, 150. Yeah,
Do you think 150 a month?
just saying.
Nah, I reckon you'd walk away with I reckon you'd net about £75 net.
Okay, so Mr. Realistic,
Yeah,
and then Mr.
75.
Optimistic, 75 to 150 pounds. Whoop-de-doo. So in terms of cash on cash.
Yeah.
So if we went with £75 times by 12, you're looking at 150. You're looking at around £900
Yeah.
profit a month. And then divide that over 25 grand, you're looking at a return of, just off my head, just around maybe 4%.
Yeah, it's not a good return.
Well, it's better than banks, what you can get of like 0.25 to 0.5, but it's not as good as what you could potentially get
Yeah, so
with other strategies, that is.
if you put your 25, 30K in, you're getting £1,000 a year back out. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't touch it. The only benefit of that and the ownership is the fact that you would have your increase in prices over the long run. So, guys, I'm adding the caveat here, over the long run, because I don't think prices are going to be exploding this year. And actually, I was just looking at RICS and all these, the estate agencies, the big ones, the Nationwide, all these indexes and what they're reporting. And they're all saying 1% to 2% rise for 2020 in house prices. I don't know if you've seen that report.
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
So it's good information that I'm hearing now.
Yeah, so 1% to 2% rise this year, 2020. And there was about 7 or 8 of them, and they all gave the same figures. Now, that's quite funny because they're all UK-based, but you look at the EU sort of forecasts and you look at some of what the economists say who study the UK market from outside the UK, and their forecasts are ridiculous. They're like 20% drop, 40. This was the I think it was the EU or the IMF. 40% drop. UK is going to suffer. Some of these people outside. So it's hard to know who's accurate because a lot of them are predicting a recession for the UK housing market this year or 2021. So they're sort of saying over the next, 2 years. But it's hard to know. So let me answer the question. Would I buy that property? No way. There's no way I would invest my money into that property, first and foremost, because A, property prices are already over the price per earnings index everywhere. They're way above. There's loads of variables at the minute. So do I think prices are going to be going up big time where you'd gain from the equity? No. So what I would be investing in is more cash flow based stuff. So if I was going to buy the property, actually physically buy that same property, I wouldn't rent it out. What I'd do is I would do it on leases for serviced accommodation, like Airbnb, Booking.com, TripAdvisor and the like. That's what I'd be doing with that flat.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable because we've got, with the £25,000, we have to consider that you've got different profiles. You might have someone that says, I actually just want to outright buy and hold it. I want the security that I own this property. So then you've got the strategy of saying, how do I increase my rent? How do I increase my income? And that's where your solution comes in of a serviced accommodation. Yeah.
So that's definitely what I'd look into. It would be the service accommodation model on that same apartment. So again, you'd have to buy correctly. So that might, let's be honest, it might not even work for a service accommodation. If it was one of the higher end ones I was talking about, so in a city centre, luxury, that'll work perfect. You'll do really well from it. But if it's in a rougher area where you're going to get a lower...
Which based upon the type of properties we're talking about, it will be in a lower end area.
And you'll get a lower category of tenant. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean in terms of the risk. The risk and the demographics as well. So you might get people who maybe they're on a housing allowance. And again, I've got nothing against it. My older business partner, if you remember, Ash, he only does housing allowance. And he was happy with it. But I remember when I used to sit in his office and we used to chat and go over stuff, every 5 minutes there was a phone call. Yeah, you haven't paid your rent. You haven't paid your rent. How much are we? Oh, we're owed all this money. Oh, there's this issue, that issue. It's like constant. And like for him, he didn't mind because he had a strategy for always collecting it, right? So he always collected the rent. He did fine from it. But for me, I tried that market. I didn't like doing that market because there was just too many issues in comparison to doing like a more of a luxury market. But it's a funny thing because you also get issues with the luxury market when you're renting it. Because some of these people, they've got visions of grandeur and they rent way above what they can afford, thinking, expecting that they're going to get better jobs and keep earning. And then sometimes they don't and they crash out. So, you know, it doesn't matter which way you look at it. There's going to be difficulties.
But for the investor that actually just wants to buy, hold and say, this property's got my name on it.
Yeah.
So you've got option of do a standard vanilla buy to let and maybe net between 75 realistic or 150 pessimistic.
Yeah.
Or go down the route of serviced accommodation, but it comes with its risks of whether it will attract the right type of clients. Because it could be you try and aim for more of a luxury market, or you try and say another option is try and right fit that property. If you're going to go down the serviced accommodation route, try and right fit that property. So maybe it could be more for contractors or blue collar contractors.
Possibly, if there's building work in that area.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's so it's more thinking what's around the area, what's around that property that could fit the bill.
Yeah. So let me just come on. Have you got anything else to add before I go on to mine, what I'd probably do with that money?
So I think it's more of, so we're just setting the context of you've got an investor that's got 25,000.
Yeah.
What's the standard way to do it?
Yeah.
And then you've got the mindset of, I want to hold this property. What can you do with that? Another option with the same tenant, same type of owner is go down the route of doing a lease option. Now, what do you mean by lease option? So a lease option is effectively an agreement for you to, where you agree to have your property sold to a buyer in this particular situation at a fixed rent at an agreed period of time. But they've got the option to purchase it. Yeah. So one way you could do to increase your rent is where if let's just go off the example, the rent is £550 per month. Yeah. Now, with a lease option, what you're looking for here is rather than get your standard tenant who's going to be on a normal 6 month, or if you can get it a 12-month AST, you'll get an agreement on a lease option basis. So they'll become a tenant buyer. So they're looking to potentially buy that property.
Also known as an assisted sale.
Yeah. So that tenant buyer, the mindset and the thought behind that tenant buyer is going to be very different to your traditional tenant, because this tenant buyer, for whatever reason, might be struggling to get on the property ladder. So the only route to potentially do that is by agreeing to this type of assisted sale lease option agreement. So they've got a bit of deposit left. They're looking at this property as something they own. And the issues that might come with having a normal tenant where they break things or they don't look after the property is actually very different. I've got an example of one of the properties we've got up in the north where we've got a tenant buyer. We've agreed a good price with it. We've agreed a higher price to that tenant buyer. And that tenant buyer, can you believe it? They've actually fitted a brand new shower in it.
Yeah, I can believe that.
brand new shower. So all the kind of inherent issues are gone out the window. They pay on time all the time. So standard rent for the area, $550, but then because it's a tenant buyer, they've got what they call a top-up fee.
Yeah.
And that top-up fee could range between $100 to $250 on average. So let's just go for optimistic of $250. Your total rent will then be £800.
Yeah.
So then you're going from netting around £75 to potentially netting around £300.
Yeah, that's good. That's nice.
Okay. So that deals with an investor who wants to buy and hold it. What's your thoughts then, Neil?
Yeah, I like that option. Mine's slightly different. But again, I think there's so many variables to this. I could go on all day because I can think of at least 7 or 8 variables to this, each answer I'm going to give right now. But for, let's say 25,000. So the person's got 25,000. They want to invest that 25,000. If I were in that person's shoes, what would I do? Not me, Neil, but if I was that person without the knowledge that I've got, what would I do? And I think what I would do is not listen to what a lot of the trainers out there would say, which is to buy a buy-to-let, right? Get on a training course, spend $5,000 with me, and then buy a buy-to-let. I wouldn't do that because I've been through that and I made the mistakes of it. What I would do, so I've got £25,000 here. Okay, so here's what I would do with that $25,000. I would invest it in some sort of education, and I would broaden my education. So I'd look at all the different sort of property strategies, and I'd start with books. And for those people who don't like reading books, audios, you can listen to the book audios or some sort of audios. I'd watch YouTube videos. I'd listen to podcasts like this. I would really just broaden my knowledge and get a good idea of the different property strategies out there. So that way I know, okay, this is the things that are available. Okay. And then I would say, what best suits my personality? Because I'll give you an example of this. When I was doing all these different strategies and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, am I going to do rent-to-rent, service accommodation, deal sourcing, lease options, building? Am I going to do development, commercial to resi to commercial? There was like title splitting. There was all this stuff. I was doing everything, and I was just getting really confused. And then someone would say to me, oh, actually, you need to do building because this is development. This is where you're going to make all the money. So I got into development, did a couple of projects, and I'm like, you know what? This is really high risk for me. Like personally, I felt it was too high risk. And I kept coming up with all these challenges, and then, oh, this sewer line is, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, your plumbing lines, oh, your electrics, you've got to bring this in, you've got to do. It was just so much work. And I thought, you know what, leave this to the big boys. Leave the development to the big boys, unless I was going to put all that time into it. So eventually what happened was from studying all those strategies, I eventually came down to about 5 strategies that I really liked. And of those 5...
And how did you... Because for the person listening at home, they might be thinking, well, there's so much out there, like you explained. How do I make a decision? I know you said based upon your personality, but is there what helped you make that decision? Yeah,
so I can't... people might listening might think, well, Neil's obviously going to say rent-to-rent, service accommodation, deal sourcing with the lease options. But I'm actually not. I'm going to say that's right for me, but I can't say it's right for other people. So what made it the right decision for me was I saw from doing, so it wasn't just theory. It's not like I'm sat here talking theory. I actually did all these different strategies. And where I made the most money with the lowest risk was the rent-to-rent. So that was number 1, rent-to-rent. Because even if I had an issue with a landlord, I hadn't put more than a couple thousand into that property. I own the furniture, so I can take the furniture out, right? If I've got an issue with a landlord, I've got a 2-month exit clause. So I just walk away from the deal, and that's that. Easy as that. But I'm making money. So I think the average is like 350% return on investment per year.
So what about for the, because that's a good example of what made you do it. So so what made you do that is by make a decision is based upon doing it, seeing that it works. But what about for the person who may not have the time to do it?
Okay, so if someone hasn't got the time to do all that research and go through it all, well, firstly, I'd say make it fun. So make it a game. Yeah. Like, you want to collect the knowledge. It's a game. You want to figure out how can I get the most return on my money? Because when it really comes down to it, money is right up there, just below health, right? So health is the most important thing. Without our health, we haven't got anything anyway. But money is really high up there. So without money, you really can't do a lot. But if you just you expand that money, that monetary supply that you've got, and you can expand it, now your options are so more open. Like you expand all your options, you expand everything. So the first thing I always recommend to people is education.
Definitely.
I never recommend people do what, again, I'm not going to name names of trainers and people, but a lot of trainers, they get them on their courses and then they get them to buy a buy-to-let property. I just don't think that's the right idea, because if I look at the first 5 to 10 buy-to-lets that I bought, only 2 out of those first 10, let's say, were good deals that I would buy again today. But the other 8 were terrible deals. That's why I had to get rid of them, because I didn't have that experience. This is why I think cash flow strategies are important. Because when you're managing and looking after other people's properties and controlling like serviced accommodation, you're doing lease options, you're sourcing for other people, you actually learn what makes a good property deal. So coming back around, what would I do with that 25,000? I would educate myself as much as possible, maybe allocate, let's say, £5,000 to education. That should get you a lot of training, like ridiculous amount of training. You should probably get at least, let's say, even with a really expensive trainer, you're going to get 5 days worth of courses from that, right? With a lower cost, you might get 10 days worth of training from it. If you go into live courses, online courses, you can get a lot more. You can get, 20 days worth or more of online courses. So I would allocate maybe 20% of the budget to education. And again, it doesn't have to be, say, my education or whatever, but just someone that you feel that connection with, and you feel like, actually, this is the person I want to learn from. I'd allocate that amount of money, and then the other 20,000, I would keep that for my strategy. I would keep that money, and I'd invest it into which strategy I was going to do. Like 20,000 will get you 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. It'll get you 6 rent-to-rents, plus you'd have some left over. It will get you at least 4 serviced accommodations. It's going to give you a nice cash flow. You're going to get at least probably 5,000 to 6,000 cash flow profit from your serviced accommodations. If you had 8 rent-to-rents and you just averaged it at, let's say, £700, again, you're going to get a really nice cash flow from that, over 5,000.
Yeah, I think that's good. Because I think for the type of investor...
So can we let me just finish one thing on that. I just realised as you were talking, we just did a comparison there. So with what I just said, that's £5,000 of cash flow versus, let's say someone just bought a flat, like we said at the beginning, that apartment, and they might make £200 or even £350 a month versus £5,000.
Yeah.
This is why the education's important. It's much more important than anything else.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you raised there. I think, but for the investor that hasn't got time on their hands, I think the education is really important for you to have the spectrum, the breadth of knowledge. And then it's a decision that says, what do I want to invest in that allows me to get high cash flow, but not necessarily have the time and energy to spend in that. And then when you think about that, that's where they can still take advantage of a lease option or a rent to rent or equivalent. But maybe you got 2 solutions, 2 channels. One is maybe actually buying a deal that's already packaged, but be aware you want to be working with the right type of packager, someone that's got compliance, knowledge, they're actually in that area and they know what works in that area. And by doing that, by getting a rent to rent or a lease option or service accommodation, you can feel out what's right. Because if you had splashed out the £25,000 and it didn't work,
you've lost it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gone.
But now if you splashed out, let's say it was £3,000 to £5,000 on the sourcing fee based upon how good the deal is. And then you've then spent maybe like 2,000 or 3,000 setting that property up, that's 8,000. But it's a deal. If you remember, if you've got a good deal that's provided by a very good sourcer, you've got cash flow from day one. That money should return maybe within a year or 2.
And you could do 3 of those and you'd still be under the 25.
And when you add the cash flow up, it's still more than the 300 at max that you'd have by owning a property. So you've got the option of buying a package deal. But also you may think, well, you could go down a route which is a bit more passive, which is actually maybe joint venturing or financing. So if you've got 25,000, maybe you joint venture, you become a partner with someone that's got the time, the energy to do the legwork, and you provide the capital, don't you?
That's a good point. And I don't think we've got time to discuss it on this show, on this episode, but joint ventures, finding a good joint venture partner would be good. All right, I think that covers the question. Anything else we want to add before we close?
No, I think that's really good content. I'm looking forward to us getting to the next episode, which is going to be how do you use £100,000, which if you had listened to episode 1 and 2, maybe it'll take you 12 months, maybe it'll take you 2 years, however long, but now you've got £100,000.
Yeah.
How do we use that?
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. See you on the next episode.